This stage that we're sitting here talking on is full of ghosts for me, because this was one of the two sound stages on which we shot the original series. And I'm talking about 1966, 67, 68. So that's over 40 years ago. I've been asked many, many times over the years if we knew how enduring Star Trek might be. The answer is, I don't think anybody could have predicted this.
Spock, it'll work. And action camera. And Mr. Nimoy.
When I was first asked to be involved in Star Trek, I said yes very quickly. I just felt that it was something that it just felt like the right thing.
Initially, we just paused on it because it's such a huge responsibility to take on Star Trek. And we were scared, but that's also a really good reason to do something. You know, when you're scared, you kind of realize, like, there's a challenge there that you have to meet.
God, come on! It's so good. It's seriously like, just all we need is music and we're done.
JJ called me up and basically said, Paramount is sort of looking to reinvigorate the franchise. Could we make it cool? You know, which is essentially the, you know, all conversations with JJ sort of gravitate towards this inevitable question is, can we make it cool?
Well, I think the key to doing anything, whatever, you know, the origin, is to do something that feels vital and relevant and connected to you.
We all kind of get involved with projects that would get us excited. Like, we only find ourselves working on movies that we would go see ourselves.
And I basically thought about it and I said, yeah, I think we could make it cool.
So after our initial trepidation, we started talking about what we wanted to see.
Bob and Alex worked with JJ for 2 full seasons on Alias. And, you know, JJ and I worked on Lost together. So when we started talking about Trek, we broke it as a unit, all of us together. That's Bob, Alex, JJ, myself, Brian Burke.
And with this team of people, too, it's a pleasure to be able to make these decisions together. It's almost like we are the crew of the Enterprise ourselves. It's sort of how it feels.
One thing that I did talk about actually having would be some kind of big thing, almost like for the pilots of the shuttles, that
Yes.
would be like a green, yellow, red light.
Indicator board.
Right, some kind of thing.
The interesting thing for me was that it was never a show that I felt like I was a rabid fan of. I enjoyed it, I liked it, but it was never, you know, like The Twilight Zone was my favorite show. So it was weird that I had this sort of this desire to do it.
The new idea, hey Brian, one love, one meeting.
One meeting.
I didn't even know, all kidding aside, I didn't even know you were talking.
Of the 5 of us who originally started working on the project, Bob, Alex, JJ, Damon, and I, Bob really knew Star Trek the most. He was the one who corrected me when I used the term Trekkie, that it's actually Trekker. Who knew?
What do you think, Bob?
Bob has been a Trekker for as long as I've known him. When I met Bob, one of the things I remember most about him is that he had an Enterprise phone, and the bridge would actually ring, and you'd have to lift up the saucer section to answer the phone.
You know, once Star Trek II came around, the Wrath of Khan, Alex fell in love with Star Trek as well, and ended up going back and kind of catching up to everything that I'd been watching.
Alex knew it pretty well, but not nearly as well as Bob, who, you know, has green blood.
But, you know, when I was growing up, every night on WPIX, which is Channel 11 in Jersey, they had Star Trek episodes, and they were on late. I mean, I always lied to my parents about that I was in bed, but I was actually watching it. And it was a black and white television, that's how I was originally introduced to Star Trek.
And then there was me, now knows nothing.
What was perfect about that is it let all of us have a voice in kind of what would make this movie work for us. And you had a guy who had never seen Star Trek saying, I would love that movie. And you had a guy who's like, Star Trek's all I live for, and this is a great movie.
We wanted it to be a movie that absolutely satisfied hardcore fans and that actually included in its very fiber and fabric the Star Trek that come before. But simultaneously, and this is the tricky part,
How do we appeal to everybody, and how do we make this movie for everyone?
How do we properly pass the baton? How do we sort of reintroduce these characters to a, universe of moviegoers who have never seen Star Trek before?
to people who maybe were never fans of Star Trek, who felt that after 40 years, 10 movies and 5 series, how am I ever going to catch up? And so this movie had to be an answer. You don't have to catch up. You can start right here.
The great irony of Star Trek is it was on for 3 seasons and then it got canceled. So the operative question isn't why was Star Trek successful? The operative question is why has Star Trek survived and how did it become a cult show?
What makes good Star Trek can only be answered on a lot of levels because Star Trek, when it's good, operates on a lot of levels.
Part of the appeal to the original Star Trek is certainly the characters, and certainly the wit of the writing.
Humor is a big part of that. Not a parody, not irony, but genuine humor coming out of the situation.
The characters were incredibly original and innovative, and it was not a homogenized thing.
Well, here's one thing you can be sure of, mister. Leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge.
And don't forget, Star Trek came about in the 60s, civil rights movement, women's movement. In the original series, the first interracial kiss on TV was between Kirk and Uhura. And so Star Trek is often a projection of our hopes and where we hope we could be and where we could hope we could achieve.
Permission to come aboard, Captain?
Permission granted.
As you have yet to select a first officer, respectfully, I would like to submit my candidacy. Should you desire, I can provide character references.
From the very beginning, we talked about wanting to do a Kirk and Spock story. It wasn't, interesting to us to sort of try what had been done again and again and again, and do another version.
When you come in the original series, you're coming in on a crew that already exists together. And we wanted to tell the story of how did the original crew come together.
You were never shown why and how Kirk and Spock became Kirk and Spock. Like, how did they meet and what did that look like?
Yes, I believe I have the right to face my accuser directly.
Step forward, please. This is Commander Spock. He is one of our most distinguished graduates.
And then what happens when these people meet and they have to work together? And beyond that, fall in love in a way, not in the sort of romantic sense, but like Butch and Sundance.
Spock, I'll cover you. Are you certain?
Yeah, I got you. So that was the core of the movie. And whenever we were talking about all the crazy plot things that were going to happen, we'd always go back to, wait a minute, how is this helping that central storyline of Kirk and Spock?
Coming and action.
You got it. Arm phasers. Fire everything we've got.
Yes, sir.
One of the challenges that we faced in thinking about how we were going to bring this world back was how to tell the story of the original bridge crew and yet make their futures unpredictable.
What is a version of an origin story that doesn't limit us to the classic prequel dilemma, which is, hey, I know that they survive, I know that they're okay.
And that led us to thinking that if someone were to come back in time and alter their fates, then they would be thrown onto a new timeline, and yet they would be the same characters who we all knew and loved.
We knew that changing the timeline was going to be an extremely controversial decision, and that's why we knew the only person who could technically be responsible for that would have to be Mr. Spock himself, Leonard Nimoy.
So we broke the entire story on a wing and a prayer, hoping that when we presented it to him, he would want to do it, when all the evidence was to the contrary. And the sort of, philosophy was Nimoy never wanted to do another Trek again.
Well, it was critical. I mean, we first met with Leonard and also with William Shatner. We met with them to discuss the film. This is prior to writing it. And it was very clear that this was not an easy decision. And the idea of stepping back into these shoes or putting the ears on again was something that I don't think he ever thought he would do again.
It was a tricky thing because when we first sat down with him, which was a dream just to meet him and just to get his thoughts, and we kind of pitched him a version of what we were thinking.
And when you're pitching, okay, here's the evolution of Mr. Spock to Mr. Spock is about as horrifically, terrifying as he can get.
And he responded so graciously.
But he listened very quietly, and he was so quiet, in fact, that we couldn't tell what his reaction was. And then finally, you could tell that he was clearing his throat because he was so emotional.
I very quickly got the sense that they really understood what was the best of Star Trek and what made it good Star Trek. And I was encouraged by that.
Sir. Good to see you.
We are a work in progress. Don't get scared. Don't get scared.
I'm not scared. I'm not scared. Look at that. How goes it?
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
Obviously, he cannot commit to something like that without a script. So based on his just nod that maybe it might be something interesting, we wrote the script with him being a key part of it.
So had he read the script and said, no, which he had done, by the way, in the past with other versions of Trek where he had not wanted to get involved, we would have been screwed. It would have been a disaster.
When I got the script, I became very interested. I thought they'd done a very good job of capturing certainly the characters, the characteristics of the original characters. I thought were going to be quite wonderful in this movie. I also thought they were really going to do justice to the film and elevate it to another level that it had not been able to reach before.
He seemed very moved by it and was up for the part one more time.
We got a call right away that he loved it and that he was in, and we thought, thank you. So it was pretty great.
Leonard Nimoy is Spock. Can you believe this?
It felt like, oh wow, this is real. We're actually doing this, Like there were moments along the way that were kind of these sort of threshold crossers where you're suddenly like, oh my God, we're actually making this movie, Like when Leonard first worked with us, it was like, oh, we're actually making a Star Trek, They're just these moments that felt very cool.
Is this 3? Close 3.
And
Good energy and action. How we doing, Scotty?
the ship, unbelievably, is in position, sir.
Whatever happens, Mr. Sulu, if you think you have the tactical advantage, you fire on that ship, even if we're still on board. That's an order.
Well, in everything we do, we keep thinking, well, what would we want, as fans first and filmmaker second.
Energize.
Get out. That is so cool.
The idea that you could be watching a film and finding, layers upon layers or things that are only for the really diehard fans. And in the case of Star Trek, there are a lot of really diehard fans.
You realize how unacceptable this is?
Fascinating.
There are definitely certain staples that you have. If you're going to pay homage to the original series, you got to have a red shirt. And he's got to die.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Dead right.
And then you gotta have a green Orion girl.
It's too hard for me to say in person.
Jim.
Yeah.
2 Klingon vessels. They entered the neutral zone and are locking weapons on our ship.
That's okay.
That's okay?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
There are certain things in the kind of, the lore of Star Trek that people know about who are fans but hadn't seen before.
Well, should we, I don't know, fire back?
No.
You never saw Kirk taking the Kobayashi Maru test, which is the test that he apparently, cheated to win the unwinnable test.
Arm photons. Prepare to fire on the Klingon warbirds.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? We done? That was awesome. Got it.
And also, there were certain things that we knew we wanted to do, but we had to be true to what's come before.
Part of our job was to be sort of keepers of the Star Trek continuity.
It became you know, literally watching and reading everything, because you have to stay consistent with so many years and so many different generations of Trek.
Good luck.
One of the main ways we fact-checked ourselves during the process is that there's just so many amazing smart fans. There's amazing websites, there's amazing fan books, there's amazing fan everything, and so you could literally go, do you remember the thing? And someone invariably knew it.
There's people outside waiting for autographs as we arrive. And pictures, cameras.
You find out that there's a lot more Star Trek fans out there than you ever thought. I remember the day we announced that we were doing Star Trek, one of our assistants called and she was like, I'm shaking. I go, what's wrong? She goes, I'm a closet Star Trek fan. And you realize they're everywhere.
Now, do you
You're
go...
going to have this for the rest of your life.
You said it to me the first day I met you in the elevator, remember? You said to me that.
You're screwed. They're great. God bless them. The fans are great.
Bones, buckle up. Same ship, different day. Cut. Good. Cut it.
Part of it, too, was to know when to shut up and actually let him find new stuff.
We can't be only doing this movie for the audience that is ultimately about the Trek canon.
Oh my God, it'd be really cool.
Yeah.
In a way, that was as important for us sort of being there to help JJ, to say, don't worry about Star Trek too much. I think we've got it covered, and I think now it really is your job to find out what you like about it in these moments.